Good morning, everyone, and thank you for attending the February Lunch and Learn. My name is Chanel Georgette. I'm the Forensic Product Manager, and I also have Hao Lee on the line today from Tech Support to answer any of your questions. Today's webinar will be on creating surfaces and road profiles. So today's topics to cover will be creating a profile without a surface. We'll then align a vehicle symbol to the profile, create a surface. We'll place 3D symbols on the surface, and then we'll create a profile with the surface. So maybe you have points imported from a data collector, or maybe you have line work mapped from your UAV or point cloud data. To create surfaces, you need both points and line work. In this example, I have points and some lines for the roadway edge. If I rotate the drawing, I can see the points are at varying elevation. So let's switch to the center line layer, and I'll use a 3D polyline to draw the center line. Make sure my node snaps are turned on so I can snap to the points. And now we can switch to the ditch layer, and I'll just use lines to connect these points. If you have line work drawn and you'd like to quickly add points, you can use the divide tool. So I'm going to use the divide tool on the ditch lines. So I'll select the line and then number of segments, I'll use 5. So it inserts points along that line, giving me the 5 different segments, and I'll do the same for the second line. So with this center line that we just drew, we can quickly create a profile of the roadway, which would be useful for determining sight lines. So first, let's switch to the profile layer, and this will allow us to freeze that layer afterwards if you wish to hide it. So to open the surface ribbon, we're going to right-click anywhere on the ribbon and go to Show Tab, and then go down to Surfaces. And on the Surfaces ribbon, we're going to use Profile Drape Line. So we select the entity and hit Enter, and then we're just going to accept the defaults from the program. And then it wants to know the origin for the bottom left corner. We'll place it up top here. So you can see the profile came in with the grid, and if you no longer want the grid, you can select it and delete it. And now we can easily place a side view of a vehicle on this profile line. So if I go to the Draw ribbon, I'll just rotate my cursor so it's aligned with the slope. You can see my cursor rotated there. Then I'll go to the symbol library and I'll select from my recents the Camaro right view, and we can close the dialog. And then I can place that symbol just directly on that line and right click for a 0 rotation. So we'll just want to make sure that we reset the cursor when we're done placing vehicles on that slope. And there we go. So now we can create a surface from our roadway lines. So I'm going to switch to the surface layer, and I'm going to freeze the profile just to hide it for now. So we have our points and our 3D polyline for the roadway lines. We've drawn a couple lines for the ditch at 0 elevation, and now I'm just going to create a 3D boundary around the general area of the surface. So I'm going to snap to these points. I'll snap to the center line. So before creating the surface, we want to check what the lowest elevation point is. And in this drawing, I know that the lowest point is at 0 elevation. But to check your defaults for the surfaces, we're going to go to the configuration settings, data extraction, and in the Z range, the minimum is 2. So we want to make that, let's say, -2. So it includes all of our points when creating the surface. So I'll hit OK to those. And now we're ready to start creating our surface. So the first thing you'll do is extract points. You can give the surface a name and select OK. And I'll select all the entities and hit enter. And if I open up the command line, I can see that 306 points are in the surface. And then we're going to extract breaks. So it's the same surface. I'll hit OK and select all. So the triangles have been built. And now we can show or draw our tin. So down here at the status bar, it says the current surface. So I'll hit enter. I'm going to type D for draw. And then I'm just going to accept the defaults. There we can see our surface has been created. So the triangles are shown in a 2D wireframe, but if you go to the Home tab, you can change to the realistic visual style, and that creates that solid fill. And by default, the color is based on elevation. So let's go back to 2D wireframe. I'll go to a top view, and we're going to explode this surface so that we can change the colors to represent the roadway and the ground. So I'll select the triangles that represent the ditch, and I'll just unselect the lines on the end here, and then I'm going to type down at the status bar, I'm going to type weld, and that's just going to join all of those triangles together so that when I select it, I can right click and go to my properties, and we can just change the color to a green. Then I'm going to do the same for the roadway. And type weld. And those can be changed to a gray color. So now when we switch to realistic, we can see the color's been changed for us. And now we can add a 3D symbol to the surface and align it to the surface that we just created. So from the, we'll close the properties panel, and from the draw ribbon, we'll go back to our symbol librarian, and I'm going to choose the 3D Camaro, and I'll close there. So I'll just snap it to the surface here, and we're going to be changing its position. So if you open up the animation tab, we're going to use adjust symbol. So I'll select the symbol, and it opens up a different window, allowing you to manipulate this symbol on the surface. So the first thing I'll do is zoom out, and I just want to place this Camaro in the middle of the road. So I'll use the sliders down here. I can either click or I can drag. And I can fine tune it with the smaller buttons just to get it in the right spot. And then if I double click on the hood, that sets my center for rotation. So when I drag my left click and drag, I can rotate in this window. And I'm just going to adjust the symbol in the Z axis, and then I'll adjust the pitch. And then we just went a little bit too high, so I'll use joggers to lower that down. All right, and then when we hit OK, it adjusts on the drawing. We'll unselect that vehicle, and we can see our symbol is on the roadway, aligned to the surface. So if you have your surface and now you want to draw the profile, the process is slightly different. So first of all, we'll go back to the top down, and I'm just going to draw a line across the surface, and that's going to be a 2D line. And then when I go back to the surface ribbon, I can drape this object onto the surface. So it wants to know the surface to drape it on. Ground is correct. I'll hit enter, and then I will select the line and hit OK. Do you want to delete the original? Yes. So this line is now draped onto that surface. So now we'll go back to the surface ribbon, and we'll use the profile drape line as we did before and select the line, and we'll accept the defaults once again. And select the origin. And this grid once again can be deleted. So those are two ways to create a profile of the roadway with and without surfaces, and also how to create a surface with points and line work and place a symbol on that surface. I've included a PDF in the handout section with step-by-step instructions on what we covered today. Also in the handout is a link to the help desk where you can find some movies for creating surfaces with point cloud data. So please download the PDF and try out creating surfaces for yourself. Thank you everyone for attending this Lunch and Learn. The next Lunch and Learn will be in March, and the topic is to be determined. If you have any suggestions for Lunch and Learn topics, please email myself or Ken Jones, and we'd be happy to take some suggestions and do a webinar on that. And I just wanted to show a sneak peek for version 2.2 for those of you that are tuned in today. We've included Artisan, a 3D rendering tool, into our software. So version 2.2, when you're creating these surfaces, you can use this easy drag and drop interface to just drag materials onto the roadway. You can change the ground to different grass. You can change the lighting and backgrounds. So please, when you have 2.2, test it out with your surfaces, and let us know if you have any feedback or suggestions for future Lunch and Learns. Does anybody have any questions?
Chanel, there is a couple. There is a question asking if the workflow is the same for creating surfaces with point cloud data.
The process is the same. The workflow is the same to create the surface. There is just one extra step before creating the surface. You do need to use the tool Points on Grid, and that will get your 3D points from your point clouds.
And someone asked about the cursor looking different.
So that's also another sneak peek for version 2.2. We have added a different cursor in here with some thicker bits. It's a gun sight cursor. And another one is just down here. You can increase the size of your status bar text, which makes it handy for these videos as well.
And the last one was just a question. Are we able to make the road waste surface smoother so it doesn't look flat on top.
Absolutely. This was just an example scene that I had created, so my points were quite sharp. You can use more points in here for my scene. I'm not sure if you saw at the beginning, I just had basically a point at the end, a point at the highest point, and then the same 2 points on the other side. But you can fine tune that with more points and create a smoother surface.
And that was all the questions for this session.
All right, thank you. If you have any other questions, please feel free to email myself or tech support. Thank you, everyone.